And they are muted. Are they?
Diablo 4 Campfire chat. I am Adam Fletcher. I'm the community lead here for the Diablo franchise, and I'm joined by two people here. One of them familiar face, one of them a new face. Feel free to introduce yourself, you guys.
Hi everyone, I'm Charles Dunn. I'm an associate game designer working on the live balance team.
Okay.
And hey everybody, I'm Adam Jackson. I'm the lead class designer for Diablo 4.
No,
And
they
as
just
you guys
adjusted
know, like last week we talked a lot about season 2. We
sound
actually
volume.
revealed kind of like all the details about season 2.
Okay, the sound volume is a tad
we
loud
went into
because I
a
think
bunch
it's
of different
over
updates
the
that are
dev
gonna be
stream
coming
and
with season 2, and then this stream was specifically for class updates, talking about resistances, talking about updates to damage buckets.
So welcome
and
to part 2,
more. We
everybody.
actually have a lot to talk
Reaction
about.
live from
Hopefully you guys like
channel.
numbers because I brought some designers. Hopefully you guys like to hear about all these changes that we're going to be going through. But at the same time, we're also going to be talking about some future updates that are coming for the game as well.
Yep.
We will talk about the first update that's going to be hitting after Season 2 launches, which is patch 121. So we'll be hitting on that at the end of the actual stream.
Okay.
But before we kind of like jump into 121, I know that you guys have a lot to talk about regarding
Patch
classes,
1.2.1.
resistances, damage buckets, unique items. Take it away, Adam.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, we can start jumping to slides. So the class team and really the whole Diablo 4 team has been very
Focus
busy
on
with,
addressing player feedback
improving the
and
game.
making systematic
so our
improvement.
strategy for the
5-point
Season of
strategy.
Blood is kind of a 5-point strategy.
Okay.
The high-level goal here was we were focusing on addressing player feedback and really making systemic improvements to the game. We wanted to improve the whole foundation of the game from the ground up as much as we could. So our
Oh my
strategy
God.
for the Season of Blood.
It's a little bit
Firstly,
dangerous.
we
I'm not
wanted to
gonna
update
lie, but
elemental resistances. We've heard
when they say things like this, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it sounds very dangerous from my personal experience. Okay.
feedback that they weren't quite hitting the mark that we wanted to,
Barbarian.
and so we're making some changes there. We're also looking to make uniques more exciting and impactful.
That's good.
We're also going through every class systemically and looking at improvements to address commonly talked about issues that we've kind of heard from the community and from playing the game ourselves.
Okay.
We're also updating damage buckets and the underlying math of how the game works to make it a little more even and have better parity between builds and classes.
Okay.
And then the final one is really making all of these changes a bonus and making it feel like this is a large
Update damage
improvement
buckets.
to the
Are they
game from the
going to
ground
buff
up.
it
So I
or
think we'll
nerf
take
it?
it over to
There's only
Charles first
buff
to
or
talk
nerf,
about
right?
elemental resistances.
Yeah, let's talk about resistances. So currently in the season
Unless
of the
they're talking
Malignant
about
on live right now,
class balance,
resistances are
then that would be
calculated in a
different.
way called inverse multiplicative. So what this means is that if you have, say, 20% poison resistance, and then you grab another piece of gear that has 20% more, your character stat sheet will actually show that you have 36% poison resistance. And that's because there's a diminishing returns. On the more resistance you get, it will never quite get you up to 100%. It's always kind of like 20% of the, the remaining amount.
Let me know if
doesn't
the
quite get you
dev
up to
stream is
100%.
loud enough compared to my
And
voice.
this means that you can stack resistances essentially infinitely. There's no hard cap. You could get resistance on every piece of gear, and it would contribute to reducing that damage that you're taking.
Okay.
Additionally, right now, armor contributes both to elemental damage reduction. It kind of gets factored into this calculation, and it also reduces the physical
Inverse
damage you take
multiplicative?
from just enemies' regular attacks instead of the
Thank you.
elemental
Yes.
attacks. So going forward into the Season of Blood,
I'm glad.
resistances are going
glad it's
to change how they're calculated,
for
and
you
they're now
guys.
going to be additive. So that means if you have the 20% poison resistance and you grab another piece that has 20% more,
Okay.
you're going to have 40% resistance on your
Finally!
character stat
Did not I said it since day one, everybody?
sheet
This should be
exactly as you would
additive!
expect. Although since
Resistance-wise,
this adds up,
resistance-wise,
additively now,
shouldn't
we
it
do need
be
to add a cap.
additive?
So the resistances are going to be capped at a baseline of 70%. So your
Makes more
character can
sense.
stack as up to 70% resistance. There are some effects in the game
Well,
that
I'm
allow
actually-
you to go up to 85%.
I'm not gonna lie to you
with
guys,
various-
okay? In this case, although it might add more affixes to our gear to grind, but given I think it should be quite interesting to be, let's say, have different loadouts, different gear sets, to have 100% resistance to certain element. Just saying, okay? My own opinion.
effects that increase your max resistance.
Gonna
but
start
those are
university
rather
one.
rare because they're quite powerful.
It's I think they just made a
Additionally,
mistake.
Armor is also going to
it is-
only affect physical damage.
My gut feel
As it
tells
used to do
me
both. It's now only going
when
to
the
be
game
calculated
first
when
launched, I
you're
think
taking
it
physical
was a
damage
mistake
and not when you're taking
over the
elemental
end. Of
damage.
course, it's just my humble
Additionally,
speculation.
to kind of make everyone have
According
a
to
baseline
the
level of resistances,
gem,
we're going to
the
be
diamond
updating
gem,
rings so that they have
we place
all
on our
resistance
jewels.
at all times.
8%
Amulets already
multiplicative,
have all
that's
resistance,
ridiculous.
But rings used to have two
It doesn't make
separate
any sense to have
elemental
8%
resistance. They could have, say,
multiplicative.
fire resistance plus cold resistance. Now they'll have all resistance along with one random one, such as fire resistance.
I think they're adjusting the microphone.
And in order to really make sure that your
in a
character
dev
can
stream,
survive a lot of these elemental damage that the monsters are going to be thrown out at you, you definitely want to be able to stack a lot of this resistance.
There we go.
But there's a lot of options
I can
to get
finally
it. You can get it through
increase
gear
my
affixes, through Paragon points,
earphone
skill tree
sounds.
nodes, as well as consumables and variety
Earlier
of
it
other
was too loud.
sources. So let's talk a little bit about the overall
I just
impact
missed
that
whatever
you're
they
going to
said
see
because
as a
I'm
player. First and most importantly,
Okay, let me
resistances
resist, let's
are
go.
going to matter a lot more in Season of Blood. They are just going to be a very important part of building your character. You're definitely
Resistance will
going to
matter
want to
more,
look to try
of
to
course.
cap up at that 70% mark as you're getting into the late game and fighting the most dangerous monsters. They're also going to be a little bit more complex. There's a little bit of a puzzle to solve here with hitting that cap. You're going
Lucky
to want to
hit
get
live?
resistance. Yeah, resistance stonks for sure.
You're gonna care about them.
You're definitely going to want to be caring about resistances as you're building your character in
Lucky
Season of Blood.
hit live, guys. Oh, my
Let's talk
apologies.
a little bit about our overall goals for the elemental resistance system. And I think it's important to talk about goals when we're talking about these really big systemic changes. Because
Okay, you
as
know
we're
what?
going
Let's stay
through
optimistic.
and tuning a
I'm
lot of the
excited.
numbers
I'm
and the
still
balance
excited.
of everything that's coming
Go with
in Season of
endpoint.
Blood. I mean, there's a lot in Season of Blood, obviously. We
So,
are going to be looking at the tuning
FYI,
about
every resistance cap, oh sorry, that's at level 80 for more resistances. 70% cap for level 80.
of these
How about
systems
at
through
100?
the lens of these goals. So if it
Okay, I can somehow predicted at this point, right, that it will be more challenging for players in general, new or old, new or seasoned, for this brand new season 2, it's gonna be way harder to level up our brand new characters.
turns out that some
Think
of
about it.
our exact tuning, maybe isn't hitting these goals, then we're going to
I
be
like it.
reevaluating them.
I
and
like
that's why
it.
we really want to share our goals for these systems with you. So the first one is that we want this system to have an endpoint. Players should be able to hit that
More
70%
challenging.
cap at roughly level 80 for most resistances. This isn't going to be something that you're chasing up to level 100 and you need absolute best possible gear in order to hit this cap. It's going to be something that's very achievable for most players as they're getting into that late game around level 80-ish.
Because
Our second
we'll be
goal
getting
is that
ancestrals.
all players, even if they're not paying too close attention to this, shouldn't fall too far behind. That's why we're adding the all resist to rings and amulets. This is a failsafe to ensure that players will always have some baseline minimum amount of resistance, so they're not getting completely destroyed by elemental damage if they're not really
Isn't that
optimizing
the case
this.
already?
And finally, this is going to be a puzzle to solve for players as you're building your character, and there's a lot of paths to solve it. This isn't a situation where you need the absolute best possible gear to solve this. It's that we give you a lot of different options. You can get affixes of resistance through Paragon, Elixirs, gems in particular is very important. And it's all about optimizing your character to find the best way for you to reach the resistance cap rather than can you reach it at all.
Okay.
I really want to highlight this elixir here. We've updated all of the elemental resist elixirs so that they also include, you can see here, a maximum poison resistance increased by 6%.
Oh, you
And
guys
that's
can't see the
really
potion. I
impactful,
apologize. Hold on.
especially because the resistance that you get kind of in excess of 70% is disproportionately valuable. Just to give you an example, let's say you're going from 0% resistance up to 5% resistance. What that means is, well, you're taking
Sorry about
5%
that, guys.
less damage. You would have taken 100 damage, now you take 95.
Sorry about
But if
this.
you're already at, say, 70% resistance at the cap, and you go up to 76% resistance, what that means is if you were to take 100 poison damage, well, at 70%, you would have taken actually 30. But now at 76, you're only taking 24 because you have 76% resistance.
Okay.
And that's actually a 20% damage reduction. You're gaining a lot more effective life whenever you add that extra cap at the end. So really getting to that cap and pushing above the cap is a great way to give you a better fighting chance against
the
some
cap.
of these late game bosses who all have these elemental effects. And yeah, these elixirs are going to be a key part of your arsenal to take on those late game bosses.
Elixirs? Ah, okay, yeah.
All right.
Oh, yeah.
I think we want to
so
move
elixirs,
on to the next-
resistance
to the,
elixirs
uniques.
are now
Adam, take it away.
relevant.
Yeah, so
Season 2 onwards.
Firstly, talking a little bit about those goals really quick. Something that is really important to me and the team is that
That's great.
when we're talking to you about the updates we're doing to the game, that you understand kind of why we're making these changes and what our goals are, because you're going to see as we go through all of these, we're changing like a lot of how the underlying math and other systems of the game work. And the odds are high that we don't nail everything perfectly. But if you understand what we're trying to do, and we're more transparent
Sorry guys, I
about
actually
that,
blocked
then when
the
you're having discussions
elixir
with each
earlier.
other, when you're giving
I
feedback
apologize.
to us, they can just be a little bit more high level and better sources of information when you also understand why we're doing things. So now moving on to uniques, let's get into it. So generally, we feel, and we've heard the feedback, that they're just not exciting enough. For the end game chase items, they're supposed to be really, really awesome and cool. They're just not hitting the mark a lot of the time. Too often players really don't feel good when they drop, and really what is an alarm bell for me personally is that when there's a unique for your build and it's intended to be good for that build, let's say like a fireball unique for a fireball sorcerer, and then a fireball sorcerer doesn't even want that, right? Like we don't want that situation to happen, whether it's because the unique effect isn't good enough or the stats on the gear aren't good enough. We want to make sure these are exciting and awesome and attractive to get.
Uniques are generally not
So we did a
aesthetic
giant
enough to
pass, and we updated nearly every single
it's true.
unique in the game. Not all of them, but pretty close.
Make unique have random affixes. I don't know. Because it seems to me, even from the current state of the game, unique drops are pretty freaking random. So that's a good thing. If they keep up
we have a
with the current drop rate, I think they can actually have randomized, fixed randomized affixes for specific uniques.
Old strategy, and I'm going to go
Why
through
not?
here using some fake examples
I hope it's the
of
case.
kind of what we did, and then we're going to go through some real examples of actual changes that we made to the game. So the first one, and by the way, we're also not just doing this in Season of Blood, but this is kind of how we're going to be looking at making uniques unique going forward. So the first one is adding new stats to them. So as an example here, increased tornado duration isn't really a stat that exists in the game that can be on gear, but it could potentially exist on a unique. The next one is giving larger existing stat ranges. So as an example here,
But
bonus fire damage.
Isn't
would
unique
normally roll
already the
between,
case?
say,
Because
15
some
and 20.
uniques are practically specifically made for specific classes. Isn't that the case?
5%. I just made
And
these
then,
numbers
unless
up.
they're talking about
But, on a
general
unique,
uniques.
it could be between 30 and 45%, or some even higher number, right? Like we can mess with those ranges and make them more attractive. The next one is overriding slot rules. So the example here, weapons normally can't roll cooldown reduction, which is a really powerful stat on an item, but on a unique, it potentially could.
So, Season 2 uniques are enchantable, aka reroll.
And then the last one is updating unique effects. This is really like actually updating the special thing that the unique does that adds to your player power. So the example here, a unique could normally require hitting enemies from behind on Tuesdays.
Please keep
but
your
now it'll
uniques
just work when you hit enemies, right?
from now
we just make
onwards
it easier and more consistent.
until Season 2, guys. Trust me.
It's my favorite affix.
Me too. Tuesday's a good day.
Yeah.
All right.
There's
so
a
now let's
major
go through some
update earlier
actual
on,
changes.
right,
So the
when
first one
we
is
log
Fist of Fate.
into
This
Diablo
is
4,
our
so-
favorite random item.
Very
where
important
everything's just
announcement.
Lucky hit and chance based.
So please keep your
One of
uniques with
the
affixes
issues
that's
with this
close
unique
to
is that,
affixes that your
because a lot
various
of your stats on your gloves
class,
are damage
various class
related,
needs.
and this one doesn't really give you that direct just damage power. We're taking one of the lucky hit effects and changing it to a new stat that doesn't exist anywhere else in the game. That's basically a chance to give you a damage buff for a certain amount of time. So now this will make up for some of that, not giving you your, skill rank stats or other things, but now it gives you some
Okay.
damage.
They're
Next
changing
one, we've got
some
the Grasp of
affixes
Shadow.
on
This
certain
is a rogue
uniques.
unique that's themed around summoning shadow clones to do damage. You can see on the left, that's the old version. The shadow clone damage range was between 14 to 21%, and now it can roll between 31
Oh, increase.
and
Okay, that's an increase in the damage. Oh, you guys can't see. I'm sorry.
Next one, we've got Hellhammer. We've
Yes.
actually got a couple of things going on here. You can see here, first one is, again, increasing the stat ranges. The damage to burning enemies goes from 14 to, what is that, 28%. And now it's going to 42 to 70%. So a lot more damage to
Another
burning
buff
enemies.
to Hellhammer.
And then the next one is actually
They already had a
overriding
buff
slot
before,
rule and
so
adding a
another
new
buff,
stat
guys.
that can't normally be on weapons, which is ranks to
Okay.
upheaval. And when we start going later in the presentation, you're going to learn that skill ranks are really, really powerful in the Season of Blood and going forward. So this is going to make this item much more attractive than it used to be. And then the last one, updating unique effects. This is another Barbarian unique, Ancient's Oath. So before, it was that Steel Grasp launched 2 additional chains, which it's still doing and is pretty neat. And before, it was that it slowed enemies that got hit. And, you know, we found really that adding a slowed enemies isn't really quite the powerful effect that we want. So instead of doing a slow, now it's going to give you a whole bunch of multiplicative bonus damage to anything that you grab. So again, just straight up a lot more powerful than it was before.
Wait, so they decrease the
All right,
damage
now
for
we're also going to be adding some
grabs?
new legendaries and uniques to Season 2. So here we're going to go through some of the uniques
is
specifically
just
that
one
we're adding that you can be chasing when you're going through Diablo 4.
Why do they have to be so,
So this first one is called Flicker
meticulous?
Step. This one is basically
I mean,
when you evade
some-
through enemies,
some
you're
effects-
going to reduce your
Don't get me
ultimate
wrong, guys.
cooldown.
I think it's good to be meticulous when coming to balancing and stuff. But certain things, I don't think it's necessary to be so anal. Like the steel grab damage. But I would like to assume that whatever Diablo 4 game directors and whatever they plan to change or improve, nerf or buff, it's all for very good reasons. Let's just have faith.
Down by a pretty chunky amount. So you can see here, as the player is evading through enemies, their ultimate cooldown is getting a lot shorter. So you can, you know, try and create an ultimate build where you're just focused on using your ultimate a bunch of times. The next one is Scoundrel's Leathers. This is our new rogue unique. This one says that when you have inner
Item
sight
power
active and you have
600.
that unlimited energy, then on cast, when you cast a core skill, you have a chance to spawn a random trap. And this random trap can also be death trapped, so it's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, that's new unique for rogue.
And last but not
And it
least, this is one of
spawns
my favorite ones, is
random trap
Dolmen
skill.
Stone. This is for the druid, and it says that when you cast Hurricane and then you cast Boulder while your Hurricane is active, your Boulder will actually spin around you and get
Barbarian?
caught in the Hurricane. And
What's up with
yes, you
druid?
can actually have multiple boulders going on at once.
Druid,
It's pretty awesome.
are you looking at our emotes?
All right, next we're going to be talking about class improvements. So this is
Yeah,
the
we
next
had
part
lots
our
of
strategy, which
Fury,
is really
Pepe,
looking
the
at
Frog.
the issues that the community's been talking about
Feel
with
free to
every
use it.
class and
Before you actually
improving
jump
them.
in, because I know we're a lot of people are seeing the item levels on some of those uniques.
Oh, yeah.
beforehand and stuff. And
There we go.
I know last week we had talked about item level being 920, but then there's some of the uniques that we showed earlier, for instance, actually ended up showcasing like 925 or other numbers beyond. So
Yeah, I wanted to be clear.
Yeah.
Yeah, 925 is going to be the new maximum range that
925
you can
item
get
power.
for your gear. So 925 is the max high power you can get to.
yeah, so it's,
That means higher
it's
resistance
us
value.
clarifying essentially
Unless-
last week where we said 920.
Unless they're gonna stretch out the range in the resistance value between until 925, is it? I'm not too sure. I hope not. I hope there's an increase instead of stretching out to 920 for all affixes.
But it's
If you know what I mean by all affixes.
925.
Especially
Yeah, so
resistance.
we just wanted to
Resistance will
clear that
affect
up
a
with
lot
everyone to make sure that people understood.
on jewelry.
Yep. All right, so next let's talk about the uniques that you can get in the game. So as
Jewelry
you know,
will
we can go to
affect-
the next slide.
The most, I believe.
Oh, it's good?
okay.
Oh, I don't. Oh, there we
There
go.
we go.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
Sweet.
Yeah, so here we're just going to give you a preview here so you can now target farm uniques. And to be clear
sure
here,
about,
with
like,
these new bosses that we're adding in the Season of Blood,
Chest, pants,
these are the uniques
helm,
that the
though.
boss will be able to drop.
Gloves.
Now, you can
What
still
are the,
get uniques
are the
from
resistance?
all content in the
the
game.
resistance on helm, chest, pants, leggings, are they going to also be increased, or are they just going to be stretched out to 920 item power 925 or 920?
It's just a rare chance to get any of them, but you have a much higher chance to get these specific uniques off of these specific bosses. So here you can see a list. That was the first one. Next is Varshan here. So if you're chasing any of these, you know you want your Staff of Endless Rage or your, Mad Wolf's Glee as a druid. This is who
Hell
you're
yeah.
going to be target farming. Next we've got Lord Zir. So here's the list. We can stay here for a few seconds and just
Yeah,
give
well,
people
and
a
we'll
chance to see.
we'll post these lists on the on the site so that players can actually reference back to these if they need to after this.
Of
stream.
course.
But these are these are all
This
the. I know
page
we've
is
gotten a lot
very
of questions
important.
about, like, hey, you talked
It's
about
gonna be
target
our
farming,
thumbnail
like, what
for
can I
this,
actually target farm off of these new bosses?
reaction,
And
guys.
so we wanted to make sure that we actually showcase that list here, so every player can actually see all the uniques that they can actually target farm specifically from these bosses.
Yep. So this is the Beast in Ice. These are all the
Okay,
uniques
so
right
different
there.
bosses drops different uniques for
And then
different
last one is
classes.
Duriel. So here's all the uniques, and a lot of the uniques here, by the way,
Guys,
on
this
Duriel
is
are
actually
gonna
the
be new
most
ones coming
important,
in for
one
the
of the
season.
most
So he's got a lot
important
of pretty powerful
information.
ones. And then
One of the
there's
most
last but not
important.
least are the Uber uniques that have a higher chance to drop from him.
Damn.
So this is his loot table.
You know what? One of our, or should I say, yours truly's personal dream of Diablo franchise in Diablo 4 has came true. Target farm. Target boss farm. Hell yeah! Love it. Okay, Cass.
Give yourself a shako.
Yeah, Uber Uniques will definitely be more achievable in this season. They'll still be very rare, but you know, if you're getting Duriel on farm and you're killing
Where are
a bunch,
the Uber uniques now?
probably going to be able to see one of them
Yeah,
throughout a
most-
season.
Guys, this is a
Most
hell
definitely
lot
will
of
be able to
uniques,
see
by
one
the
if
way.
you're really farming on Duriel. And
This
at
is
the
a
same
hell lot of
time,
uniques.
You'll probably know a lot of people within your
Oh
own
my.
clan that actually will end up having Uber uniques this season. And again, these bosses are available in Season 2, but they're also available in the Eternal Realm on
My gut feel tells me, okay, from how the game developers, lovely game directors are announcing, sharing this season 2, part 2, all this information, right? It's like they have been bottling it up for the very long time since the launch of Diablo 4.
day
Doesn't it
one
feel that way?
with, October 17th. So.
I think that they're waiting for
Alright,
this
so
to
now
come
let's get to
out
the
for
class
so long,
improvements.
you know, because
So
everybody's
yeah, their
complaining,
strategy
nothing
here
else
was
to do,
addressing issues with
nothing else to
each class of
farm.
communities talking about. These changes are
the
mostly
uniques are
unique to each
lousy,
class,
you
and they're
know.
meant to target specific
So,
pain points that
They
players
can't
have been
wait
having.
to actually think
What you'll be
about that
seeing here
part.
today, by the way, in this presentation are just some examples.
Just
It's not a
my
list of all
humble-
the changes. If we did that, we'd be here all day. But we will be coming out with patch notes and a blog explaining
Assumption.
things pretty soon, right after this stream. We're going to give you a preview, kind of what you can expect.
Oh my.
So the first one is a general change, and this is that fortify amounts, when you gain fortify, are going to be changed from being based on your base life to your maximum life. And what this means is that increasing your maximum life is going to make these effects stronger, and this is across the board.
Yeah, I think this is a really important change for any kind of build that's trying to build really tanky. They want to build fortify, they want to build max life, and previously, whenever fortify was based on your base life, building more maximum life actually meant that it was harder to get your character fully fortified. Well, because you had more life to fortify through. And so with this change, you can see here in this example on the left, pretty much the same character, almost the exact same life total. Before, you would get about 368 fortify with this effect. And now the exact same effect, exact same character, now gets 677. So almost double amount. If you are building a lot of maximum life,
more
like this
life
character
will
is,
be
you're
harder
just gonna
to
see
fortify.
a lot more fortify values, which means it's a lot easier for your character to get into that powerful fortified state.
Okay.
All
Okay.
right, next we're going to talk about some class adjustments.
Does this
here.
apply to
So,
all classes?
During our Season of the Malignant live stream, if you remember, we talked about how sometimes we're going to need to make adjustments.
doesn't that only applies to, let's say we are using passive or active skills, or even with aspects, right? That gives us that, okay, even when we pop the potion, it gives us 45 effects like this. So 45 is actually an effect,
To things that are overperforming,
right?
right? So I want you to imagine for a little
So
bit
what's
that
the
you have
changes again?
your
I'm so
perfect game
confused.
that you're
So please
creating,
comment
right?
down
Where your
under
power
the
level of
YouTube
everything
comment
in the game is here.
section below and let me know what you think,
exactly
okay?
the same.
What do they mean by that
you know,
segment
we live in the
earlier?
real world,
Yeah.
so no game's really exactly like this. It's more like something like this, right? Where you have a range where, you know, your lowest power thing and your highest power thing are within here. And this is actually better for a healthier game, because if everything's exactly the same, then, you know, your power level can get kind of flat and boring, right? If like Fireball does the exact same as Upheaval, does the exact same as everything else, your game can end up kind of flat. So some variance is pretty good,
Okay.
right? But then sometimes, you know, when things get out of this range, that's kind of a sweet spot. If something is like way up here, then this can warp the design and warp what players are doing and warp even the perception in front of the game. So one of the things that we had talked about during that stream is when we have things that are up here, usually this is due to either like unplanned synergies, or something that's bugged or working unintended. It can get out of the range. And so we're committed now that when things get out of range too far, we're going to bring it back to that normal realm where everything is. In the Season of Blood, we're really looking at 3 situations here where this happens.
As in
Sometimes
automatically
builds and playstyles can just dramatically
teleport
be
us back
outperforming others. Another one
to
is
the
fixing
playable
unintended
area.
interactions that result in extreme outliers. These are usually like bugs or other things like that. And then designs, and this is kind of future-proofing, but we're looking at designs that have the potential for infinite power scaling. So that going forward, particularly when we're adding
Paragon
leaderboards
level.
into the game, we really want to make sure that the power levels of things isn't too out of whack, and particularly for too long of a time. So we're going to be more committed to looking at these
Even
things a
if
lot.
Paragon levels were to come in the future, let's say season 4, 5, even 3, it's expected.
So in the Season of
It's
Blood,
expected.
we don't really have too many of these, and to be clear, the overwhelming majority of our changes are going to be buffs. But these are some adjustments to get ahead of first to make sure that those power levels are kind of the same.
I'm not gonna lie to you guys, so far, right, with all this brand new implementation of specific target loot farming at specific bosses, it's a huge change actually. Huge step, huge change to the game, and it's almost like, okay, 50% of what the game is gonna be about is gonna be revealed in season 2.
We can go to the next
So
slide
there's
here.
only like 50%
So the
left.
first one is Necromancer.
of content.
If you've played a Bone Spear Necro, you probably saw this coming a little bit.
There will be
But
has
Ossified
yet
Essence,
been
your key
revealed.
passive, we're reducing
And
your
shall
damage
only be
bonus
revealed
from
in later
1 to
seasons.
0.5%. And to be clear here, even after this change,
Those of you
this
who are
key
playing
passive is
Necromancers,
still probably a contender
take
for
note.
being the strongest one in the game. It's really, really powerful. It adds a ton of damage. And really what this lets us do actually, and you'll see when you get to look at our patch notes, it gives us some room to add power in other places in Bone Necro, rather than it all being centralized only around the key passive. We're also reducing the Bone Graph Legendary Paragon node max essence per stack a little bit. You're still going
I
to be
have
able to get
no
a ton
idea
of
what they are
maximum
talking
essence
about
in the
because I
game,
don't play
but we're just
Necromancer.
bringing
Oh,
these down a little bit.
Ismark
And then
plays
the next
Necro, right?
two, these are going to be kind of
Those of you who
themed. We've
plays
got the
Necro,
Barbarian,
please
the
press
Supreme Wrath
N
of the
in
Berserker.
chat.
This is the one where while your Wrath of the Berserker is active, when you spend Fury, you get damage bonus on Berserking multiplicatively.
FYI, I still
and this
got
could
gears
scale
for
infinitely, and
specific
now we're just adding a cap to it.
classes. So let
And
me
then
know
the
if
next
you
one,
need any.
similarly for the Druid, the aspect of the Rampaging Werebeast, the crit strike damage bonus is now
All
going to be
classes
capped at
except Rogue.
200%. And again, these numbers are still really high at 100 and
Mainly
200%
weapons.
multiplicative bonus damage. We're not really looking to just nerf these things to the ground or anything. We're just making sure that there's a cap on the maximum amount you can get, so that in the future when players it lets us add things like increasing the duration of these or making an
Supreme
infinite
Wrath of
duration
Berserker
or doing
maximum
other things
damage
like
is
that
now
that we
capped
wouldn't
at
be able to do if
100%.
these were just uncapped forever.
Oh, okay.
All right, so now let's get
So
to
it won't do
specific
over damage,
classes
won't
and
be
kind
too
of,
OP, huh?
the cool things that are coming. So first thing that we've heard from Barbarian players is that their Paragon boards are just kind of weak, right? They're not particularly impactful or exciting. We're going to look here at one example, and we've changed quite a few of these. This is the Decimator Paragon node. Beforehand, we kind of turned into a meme. It gave you a low chance to apply vulnerable to enemies when using a specific weapon, two-handed slashing weapons. And now you can see in the Season of Blood, instead, it's still going to be themed a little bit around vulnerable. But now when you make enemies vulnerable, you just get a % damage bonus. And then when you overpower vulnerable enemies, you double that and you get a 20% multiplicative damage bonus. So it's much more powerful than it was before and is on par with other similar effects.
Excuse me?
Next one now is Berserking. Berserking Barbarian.
10% bonus for 5 seconds.
Patch. The damage bonus used to be additive.
As
so,
in the
when you went
duration?
to the Berserking state and you got that, damage bonus, it was only additive with your other damage bonuses, and now it's going to be multiplicative. So just being in Berserking in general is going to be much more lucrative for you. And next, the of Ancestral Force Legendary,
Barbarians.
everyone's favorite
Berserking build.
game mechanic in the game. Before
Season
it was
2
that,
is-
when you
Season
used
2
Hammer of the
onwards
Ancients,
is
it
a
nuked
must.
out some damage and then a little explosion, and then that damage kind of had a separate value.
I don't
And
really
so
play
sometimes you'd be
Berserking.
motivated to turn around and attack and not hit the enemy
I
directly
sure will
because
now.
you want to hit him with the explosion.
If
and
we are
not
going to
your
play
normal hit.
Barbarian again.
Now it's just gonna cause the quake to happen, but it just increases the damage of the base skill, and then the quake and the base skill just do one source of damage. So now you're not motivated anymore to do any strange behavior. Next one, let's
Like
talk about
what?
the Sorcerer.
What sort of strange
So
behavior?
Incinerate is getting a pretty big buff here. The ramp up time, so for those of you who don't play, you know, or play
Sorceress,
Incinerate
listen
builds,
up.
before it used to be
Sorceress.
that ramped up over 4 seconds. So you would, you know, channel your Incinerate on an enemy and the damage would go up and go up and go up over 4 seconds. And now we're cutting that in half to 2 seconds. The total damage that you're going to get is still the same. We're just making it much easier for you to get that maximum amount. And now you can reposition a lot more often.
Okay.
And next one, Enhanced Frozen Orb. We buffed this so that now it grants additional explosion damage against elites. This includes bosses as well. So normally, you know, Frozen Orb damage is kind of a big AoE damage, so a single target isn't that great. So in, you know, boss scenarios, it's not really as good. And now we've added a tuning knob here, so now we can make this, you know, much better or more comparable to other builds when it comes to big single target enemies. And then last but not least, we've got some feedback that the Winter and Electrocute Paragon glyphs didn't really have a place where they could be used on the Paragon board. So we've adjusted either the glyphs or the board itself, so now these can be slotted and actually give you a good bonus effect like the other glyphs do.
Okay.
All right, let's talk about Rogue a little bit. Now,
Yeah,
so unlike
Rogue.
maybe the Barb and the
Rogues,
Sork that we
listen
just
up.
talked about, we felt that Rogue
If you're
was
still gonna
honestly
be
in a pretty good place.
playing
We
Rogue-
didn't have as many pressing issues. There weren't as many things that we really needed to
Oh,
address
future Rogue
on
players.
Rogue. There were still some things that we saw, but not quite as many as other classes.
Okay.
The one area that we saw was with basic skills. Pretty much every Rogue build was running Puncture. Now, Puncture is a great skill. It does a whole lot of really
God
cool
damn
things,
it.
but basically the other
About damn fucking time they
four
increase the
basic
lucky hit
skills were
chance for
just
Blitz
not
Shift.
seeing really any use at all.
It doesn't make much difference for 35% lucky hit chance.
And
in all
there was a
honesty,
variety of
yeah.
reasons there. And so we have
much
taken a look
difference.
at the 4 of those to update them, mainly looking
so
at their lucky hit
effective.
chance for Blade Shift and Forceful Arrow, bringing those up to the 50% chance to kind of keep them on par with the other basics. And then Enhanced Blade Shift, the upgrade to Blade Shift, will now immediately give you the full movement speed bonus. Prior, you had to move through
This is
enemies
a
and it took a
cutthroat
little bit of time
skill.
to ramp up. We're just going to
The
give that full
basic,
move speed bonus right off the bat.
skills.
And then Heartseeker, the critical strike chance that you get whenever Heartseeker hits a target, it previously stacked up at 3.
I'm not gonna lie, I'm not a big fan of using Rogue's basic skill at all.
percent per cast.
I'm not a big
per
fan.
stack.
I only
And
use
that
it to
meant you needed
increase
hit
the
an enemy
damage
5
for my
times
core
before
skill.
you got the full 15%
For my
bonus. And 5
current
times is a
twisting
lot.
bullet build.
So now we're going to increase the gain per stack up to 5% per stack. So you can get that full bonus within 3 hits, which is very conveniently the same number that you need to max out your combo points. So Heartseeker might
Okay.
see a little bit more
Isn't
play
that
in
the
combo
usual?
point builds going forward. Additionally, we also took a look at the Impetus passive, and this one we just made it occur a little bit more often. You only need to move 12 instead of 15 meters. But more importantly, it also increases the damage of your next non-basic attack. Prior, it just said your next attack, and that meant that you would occasionally use a basic, and then you'd get the bonus on the basic,
Was it basic before? I thought it's general attack.
which didn't do a lot of damage. Now you're definitely going to be getting this full bonus
Was
on
it
a
basic
higher
before?
damage skill, like a core skill, whenever you get to trigger the Impetus.
I don't use impetus, so as far as I understood, it was general attack, right? Doesn't matter whether is it basic or trap or your any skills.
Let's talk about Druid.
Yeah, so similarly to the Rogue, the Druid's in a pretty good place.
Isn't it general
so not
attack?
quite as many updates as other classes, but we still found some room to make Druid players happy. First one is Ravens. Ravens
Druids,
is
listen
getting
up.
pretty good buffs across the board. The passive
Oh my
damage is being
gosh.
increased by 20%.
So Druid is gonna be way more OP.
That's the little
Okay.
Ravens that peck your enemies
Nice.
to death.
Guess who's
The
gonna be
active
playing
damage
Druid
is
next
also getting
season?
increased by a whopping 55%, so that's the actual circle of Ravens that hit enemies. And then Enhanced Ravens, the bonus critical strike chance that you get is going to be increased from 5 to 8%. So across
I'm
the
so
board, just
curious
much
how
better
OP
skill.
Druid actually is compared
And
to
then
other
Rabies.
classes.
Rabies is also getting a pretty
I'm
big
so
damage buff.
curious.
And then we're also making one of the upgrades, which is natural
Yeah.
rabies. It used to make it that your rabies spread
Holy
twice as fast or 100% faster. We're giving half of that baseline. So now your rabies is going to actually just spread between enemies 50% faster, so you don't have to wait as long for them to get infected. And then the natural rabies will increase that by
They are doing this buff to Druid as if Druid is not OP already.
50% to make it 100.
Yeah, Rabies feels a lot
My
better
humble
to play with.
opinion.
It spreads
That may
out the whole
sound like
pack
a-
right away.
Yeah,
Or a lot quicker.
a lot easier to
It's
use. Yep.
so funny.
And now Necromancer players. So Necromancer players will be pretty happy here. We got a lot of stuff coming for you. And again, this isn't even all of
Again,
it.
Necros, let's go.
Reach after this.
So minions, buffs,
Minion
lots
buffs.
of them. First thing is Death's Defense. This is a passive that was kind of mandatory for minion builds.
Yeah, but them
this
time,
is really
huh?
our fail-safe that a
Minion
boss
builds.
or other big hit from enemies wouldn't just one-shot all of your minions. Basically, now that passive is baseline.
Okay,
so now
okay,
they
okay,
can't
okay,
get hit
okay.
for more than.
With the next future season 2 state of the game, I think this buff is unnecessary. If they're talking about just applying to the current state of the game, it will be way too overpowered.
So much of their life without having this defense in there.
I'll also add in that this baseline functionality that your minions can't take more than 30% life, this applies to all player pets across the game, including druids, wolves. That's just how our pets now work. And of course, we've redesigned the Death's Defense passive to give you another alternative if you want even more defense on your minions.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
good clarification. Druids eating even better today
Yes.
too. Yes.
Yes.
Next, Golem. Basic attack damage is getting doubled. We're insane. But yep, so it's going to get a lot stronger. Your Blood Golem and your Iron Golem's active damage is also going up. The Blood Golem by 55%. The Iron Golem Slam is going to be 15% better. Also, many of your minion Paragon node damage values have been increased. So that scaling minion damage into the mid and late game is also...
I feel like the way they're gonna buff respective necromancers' core skills or different types of builds, they should spec it accordingly so that all skill builds are viable to choose from.
going to be a lot better.
Not just spear bombs, bone spear
Coldbringer's
build.
aspect.
Know what I mean?
This one used to say that your cold
Which I
skeletal
believe is the
mages
most
could
popular
cast
build.
Blizzard. Kind of made sense thematically.
By
Cold
date.
mages, Blizzard, cold things. But now we're opening this up to more builds. So now this aspect still makes your mages cast Blizzard, but now you can take any mages that you want, not just cold mages. And next, so we had some affix reductions here. So before we had the thorns related affixes, we had one that was specific for your skeletal warriors, one for your skeletal mages, and another for your
Codebringer
golem.
aspects
And
allow
now we're
skeletal
basically just
mages to
cleaning that
cast
up.
Blizzard
So now
instead of
having
only
three separate
instead
affixes,
of
we now have one unified.
Okay.
Your minions inherit thorns affix,
wow.
and that can appear on ranged shields and gloves. So now you're gonna have a little bit less spam of affixes that you're not interested in if you're not looking for thorns in your build.
Okay.
And last but not least, shields. This just makes sense. Shields have armor on them. So now when you have a shield as a necro,
Hold on. Shield is shield, armor is armor, right? Oh wait, necromancer shield. I apologize.
it has armor because
It's a shield.
They
It's
protect
The
armor.
sorceress.
They do.
So that means sorcerer's shield has armor too.
Yes.
Sorcerer's shield
All right,
has
so let's
armor
talk a
too.
little bit about the damage bucket changes. And when I refer to damage buckets, I'm mainly talking about critical strike damage, vulnerable damage,
Sorceress
and
has shield
overpower
built,
damage
right?
as well. So in Season of the Malignant, vulnerable and critical strike damage were different buckets, and mixing these two, so if you critical struck a vulnerable enemy, would kind of multiply all of your critical strike damage by all of your vulnerable damage, and you just get more than the sum of your parts, like dramatically more. And this meant that the optimal way for basically every single build in the game to play was to stack critical strike damage, was to stack vulnerable damage,
Yep.
and then just make
Actually,
them and then
vulnerable-
crit them.
Vulnerable damage comes first, right?
That's how you did most damage in Season of Malignant, no matter what your build, no matter what your class.
Because that's like a
And so that
vulnerable
meant that,
damage is
say,
base
an
base
item drop
damage.
that had
Sort
plus
of.
crit chance, plus crit damage, and plus vulnerable damage, that was best in slot for literally everyone. And
Yep.
that was unhealthy. It was leading to a lot of stagnation, a lot of builds that could not fully utilize critical
matter
strike
the
or vulnerable,
sequence.
say builds like dot builds, because dots can't crit. They couldn't really capitalize on this in the same way, and they got left behind builds that could.
DOT dots. Damage over time
next slide.
effects.
Yeah, so moving forward into the Season of Blood, critical strike damage, vulnerable, and overpower as well are going to be different buckets, but mixing them will only give multiplicative damage bonuses capped at a certain amount. So if an enemy is vulnerable, you're going to deal 20% more damage to them. And it doesn't matter how much additional plus vulnerable damage you get, it's not going to increase the 20% multiplicative amount. Same with critical strike, it'll give you 50% multiplicative damage. And then overpower as well. If you overpower an enemy, similar to crit, it'll give you up to 50% bonus damage based on your health total. Overpower calculations are we're not going to get into all the details of exactly how overpower is calculated in Season of the Blood here, but you can definitely check out the patch notes for a more explicit detail there. But basically know that it has a multiplicative aspect up to 50%, just like crit and vulnerable.
And it'll scale and just be better. Trust us, it'll be
yes,
good.
overpower was definitely not over.
So we have to adjust accordingly, like what to... I'm so confused.
In Season of the Malignant, it was rather on the weekend. And
it's not up to us, right? When we pick up a piece of gear that has maybe overpower first, crit, vulnerable. You know how different gears, different weapons now, if they're gonna remain the same format-wise, right? Let's say rogues crossbow. Rogues base effects for the crossbow is vulnerable damage. So
we're going into Season of Blood, it is going to be much more powerful. I really expect Blood Necros and Werebear Druids to be doing very well in this season. So let's go over an actual example here.
Yeah, guys, check this out. Druid is not doing well at any season. Are you freaking kidding me?
Numbers, just to clarify what I mean.
I'm sorry, I'm just
if you
like,
have
what?
150% critical strike damage,
Druid is already very good, yo!
That's what it shows on your character sheet, right? That's
the game
how much,
directors
critical strike damage
informed?
you have. It also factors in this 50% bonus damage that you deal anytime you crit. And similarly, if you have 200% vulnerable damage, it also factors in that 20% vulnerable damage that is just baseline to vulnerable application.
If anyone at this point knows what they are talking about, the lovely game directors, please comment down below in one simple English sentence for yours truly to understand. Looking forward to your comments under the comment section.
Previously, we would take the entire 150% and multiply it by 200%.
I'm so confused.
And that would be your damage output. It would scale really high. But now we're going to take whatever damage you would deal, and we're going to multiply it by 1.5 because it's a crit. And then we're going to take that result and multiply it by 1.2 because the enemy is vulnerable. And that's why the 50% and the 20% combine to 80. It doesn't combine to 70 because you're multiplying them together. Like I said, so you still get some synergy where it's greater than the sum of its parts, but no longer is it the full 150 and the full 200. We're just always going to take the 50 and the 20. And so that should give us a bit more... scaling will be a bit more consistent across crit and vulnerable, and you're not going to be incentivized to every build has to stack critical strike damage and has to stack vulnerable. It'll still be valuable to do it for builds that are interested in that, but it's not going to be the best in slot for every single build every time.
Well, say one of the things we wanted to do here was still motivate you, and you should be
unless they're saying the season 2 gears format, the way affixes are placed, then it should come naturally for players to understand, to get it.
Mixing multiplicative buckets.
This changes.
An interesting thing to do. Just your opportunity cost isn't insane if you.
It's a lot of changes though, guys. So far, yeah. Just in this part 2
so the overall impact that players are going to feel in Season of Blood with this is that the nominal damage numbers that you're doing are going to go down slightly. And that's because you just don't have this massive multiplicative bonuses. But we're not here trying to make the player weaker against monsters. What we actually did was we went through and looked at all the monsters in the game and retuned them to make sure that players who are, optimizing their build and have strong builds.
What do they mean by mixing damage type is less required?
Are still approximately as equal against monsters as they were before.
Nasales!
Mixing damage types, as we said, was going to be less required. It's still powerful to do, but it's not going to be the end-all be-all of the only way you can build your character.
Are you preparing for work?
And of course, building individual damage types are going to be more equal in value, mainly, like I said, about overpower. Overpower builds are just falling behind. Same with things like dot damage builds or minion-focused builds. Those are going to come up and be much more comparable to builds like critical strike-focused ones or vulnerable-focused ones, and so on.
Yeah, so we have a little visual here, but imagine this is like the current season. Where current builds are really high up there. They're doing a ton of damage. They're wiping everything.
Have you taken healthy breakfast yet? Everybody in the channel, please welcome back Nasales. Let's go!
And then all the other builds are kind of pretty far behind.
New camera?
Right? If you're not mixing these two things, then you're just less effective.
Yes, we did.
In Season 2, what we're doing is we're bringing them together.
You can tell? Yes.
And then what we're going to do after that is
the bokeh
balance
effect.
Monster power around
It's actually the lens though.
Again, our goal is not to make you weaker. It's to make everything have more parity, and we're going to balance the whole game around the new world that we live in the Season of Blood.
Sound volume.
Not about bringing crit and vuln down. It's about making
very,
sure
very happy
other
to know.
builds can reach
Hope you
that
guys
same
are
level of
enjoying this
power that
ASMR.
crit and vuln builds
Visual
experience in
ASMR.
Season of the Malignant. It'll just open up the space for more builds to reach that type of power level with a variety of skills and affixes and not just crit and vuln. So let's talk a little bit about the overall goals for the damage bucket changes. First and foremost, we really want players to be rewarded for investing into their primary vector of damage. So for example, if you're a blood necromancer who really likes to overpower enemies,
I
you're going to
totally
be
have
rewarded
missed what just happened for the last 1 minute on the death stream.
for investing in plus overpower damage, as well as other tanky stats that scale it, like health and fortify generation. And then once you invest in that as like the main bulk of your power, you can find other ways
Primary
of
vector of
increasing
damage.
that. Maybe you do find a way to apply vulnerable, but it's not going to be the main focus of your build. You can also get a lot of skill ranks to increase
What
whatever
the
your core
heck
skill
is
rank
primary
is.
vector
Those
of
still
damage?
increase your core skill damage multiplicatively with skill ranks, which goes back to what Adam had said earlier about
And
how
to
powerful
then
skill ranks
find
are going
other
to be
vectors
going
of damage
forward into
scaling
Season
as
of
they
Blood.
cost. Wow,
Also,
so
we
complicated.
don't want this to
Am I the
just
only
make the game
person
simpler.
here
We know that right now players
watched the live stream
find
this part?
they feel like they're
And a
getting
few
crit
moments
and
ago,
vulnerable on
am
their
I the
gear, and
only
that's
one
great.
confused so
that
far?
adds an interesting layer of the item chase. Like, hey, you found the best in slot item. And with this change, it's not going to be that exact same, but our intention is not to make the itemization game simpler or more boring, because we're actually making a bunch of other changes to make this a bonus, to find other ways of scaling your character in interesting ways that Adam is going to talk about here.
I agree. It's completely interesting and confusing.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it's confusing for me.
So,
Yeah.
last but not least, we're going to talk about making it a bonus. And I'm going to kind of expose a gap in our armor here. What we were really afraid of when we were
camera
looking at
is so
doing these
clear, you are able to
changes
see
is
my
that
yellow
in a
teeth.
vacuum, if we did this and nothing else, we think that it could be a negative
Yeah, I know,
experience
right?
to the game, kind of what Charles
It's a
alluded
natural
to.
color of my teeth.
What I am terrified of is that we do these changes and the reaction
because of the
basically is, wait, you're
orange
lowering
color
my damage
saturation.
and you're making it less rewarding to try and build crit and vuln. This is awful. I hate it, right?
It's not that bad, okay?
This isn't
Just
our goal,
more
and we knew that we had to
yellowish.
combine this with some other systemic updates to the game to make sure that this new world of itemization, damage buckets, and builds was something that's interesting and kind of has some meat to it as a player. And also, what we mentioned before is that we are, again, going to be tuning monsters to be more appropriate with the new player power level. Our goal here is that your player power difference should be minimal.
And
if
elemental
anything, you'll probably
damage.
feel more powerful compared to before, just because of all the unique upgrades and other,
Overall, the most important information I've heard so far, right, guys? I hope it's okay to just share it with you guys. Just so far, when we are left with 33 minutes into this dev stream, our resistance will be a big major play in season 2. It might be season 2 onwards or just season 2, and permanent changes for even in eternal realm. I believe the new target loot, specific boss target loot, Unix. That's right.
class updates and changes that we're making.
Other than that,
So you shouldn't really
need
have
to,
a huge
play the
difference in how
game
you feel
to
going through
understand
mobs
the
and
game
dungeons and things.
better.
Just you're having more
Yeah.
options of how you do it. So here's the other big part of our updates. We're adding effects to kind of give that scaling back, but instead of having it be baseline, we're going to do it through player interaction. So if you remember before, that little graphic of the crit and vuln was really high and the other player power was
get a
down
bonus.
below. How are we bringing these things together? Well, we're going to bring that player power up for the other builds through these kind of designs and effects.
But with player
So the goals with
interaction,
these changes
instead
before we
of-
get into them are twofold. The first
Wow,
is we want to
so
add
confusing.
some multiplicative power back to the player, but in a more interesting way. Because as we mentioned before, we are removing
Goal of
multiplicative
these changes
power
are twofold. We want to
by
add
capping it with crit and vuln. So we want it
multiplicative
now.
player power back in a more interesting. I think I get it. Not totally, but each classes may or players or players may have a choice to how they want to build the character. Are they going to be based on overpower? Are they going to be based on critical hit chance? Are they critical strike? Sorry. Are they going to be based on vulnerable damage? So something along that line.
Like the upside of that is that we can actually give it back.
Or
And
how
we
you
can do
build
it now
up-
in choices that you make as a player, rather than it just being an underhood thing about how the game works. And then we also want to try and make the itemization experience better, particularly in the latter portions of the game.
We need to look
want
at the new
stats you chase on your
affixes of
items to kind of be
how
more tailored
gears,
to your build and be a little bit more interesting.
of how affixes
This isn't
are
the end
on
all be all of
the
our
season
plans for
2 gears.
itemization,
It's
but this is just one way that we think we
better
can
way
try
to
and
look
make
at
your
what they are
stats
trying
and
to
your
talk
gear
about.
and how they mix
Let's
with your
give an
build a little
example.
bit more interesting. So now let's go through an example.
They're talking about the
So-
legendary node.
This is kind of, these kinds of effects are what we added kind of all over the place on all the classes of ways to give you multiplicative power. So on the left here is the
Elemental
old
Summoner. Is this
Elemental
for
Summoner
sorcerers?
Paragon node legendary, Paragon legendary node on the Sorcerer.
There we go.
And before it basically said, you know, we want you to put all the conjuration skills on your bar. And when you do, they have reduced cooldown and mana cost per skill you have. This is your Hydra, your Ice Blades, and your Lightning Spear, right? We have one for each element. Now you're still going to get that. You can see on the right, this is the Season of Blood's design. So they still get reduced cooldown and mana cost, but now we've given you a goal to chase and a way to multiplicatively scale their damage. So the way it works here is that those conjuration skills are all going to deal multiplicative more.
It's now reversed. Because legendary nodes with the current state of the game is meant to either be additive or multiplicative to our current builds, to our current Paragon 3 build, our gear set builds, our skill tree build. But I think this is reversed now. The gears that we have is going to actually buff the legendary node instead.
More damage based on the total amount of your
If
bonus
I'm not
damage
reading
stat
them
with
wrong.
fire, lightning, and cold. So here you can see, and I think these numbers actually match to what the current bonus is.
If
so
I'm
what
not
we want you to
reading
do
the
here is you go to your character sheet, you're like,
cheering them
okay,
wrong.
I want to get bonus damage to fire, lightning, and cold. These, you know, are like your plus fire damage on your gear or whatever, right? Normally these stats aren't very attractive, but now they're going to be a lot more attractive because they will multiplicatively these additive stats will now turn into multiplicative stats if you take this node and you go for this specific build.
Okay.
And the other
For
really neat
sorcerers,
thing about
for
this is that it
elemental
makes your
damage
Paragon
players.
board or Paragon nodes,
classes,
and even
sorry.
we can make items or other effects more interesting.
I think it affects sorcerers most.
You know, you get
mostly.
bonus non-physical damage. That will actually triple dip with this Paragon node legendary power because it will increase your damage with fire, lightning, and cold, and so it actually will.
Does Earth? So Earth is Druid, right? Is Earth considered a elemental damage?
Triple the amount that this one node would
Good
give
question,
you in
right?
value for this one legendary power.
Earth damage.
And we've added these effects kind of all over the place. You're going to see a lot more scaling. You're going to care about different stats that you didn't care about
Maybe-
before because now they can
Maybe
be
I shouldn't be
multiplicative
thinking
depending
too
on what
much
you
for
get.
now.
Here's
just
another one. This is one for the
Focus on the dev
Rogue.
stream.
This is a redesign that we're doing for no witnesses. So what this does is this one makes you care about your damage with ultimate stat. So this was a stat that could appear on your gear. It usually wasn't very good. No one really tried to chase it.
Okay.
But this says that now your ultimate skills on your rogue will deal multiplicative more damage based on that stat. And when you cast your ultimate, that multiplicative damage will apply to all of your skills for 8 seconds. So this kind of enables a complete new build with the rogue where you want to spam, you know, rain of arrows or whatever ultimate you can as often as you can, because even just using the ultimate is going to give you a multiplicative bonus, and that
God damn it! I should have played Rogue in season 2. Just saying.
bonus on all of your skills
I'm using
will be based
ultimate.
on this damage with ultimate stat
our
that you can
current
get via gear and Paragon and other places.
It would be much
I
more
think
better in
Rogue is
season
my
2.
favorite class to play that new flicker step unique on, where
Yes,
when you're
you can
evading
combine
through
that
enemies, you get a lot of ultimate cooldown reduction. It lets you trigger no witnesses more often. You want to build a lot of ultimate, and you can play it, you know, with Rain of Arrows or Shadow Clone or Death Trap. Any of them, it just
Death
feels really
Trap.
good and a much more cohesive
Death Trap, very
package
good.
that lets you scale to a really strong late game build and is not just based around crit and vuln. It's now based around ultimate skill damage.
Yeah, and to be clear here, this will be on all the classes.
The reason why this is happening in season 2 is because most players do not use ultimate in their rogue builds.
Got
Not
some
that I
amount of this,
know-
and it's not
not
only
that
on
I
the
saw.
Paragon board. Some of it, your key passives will be doing
I'm
this.
the
some
only
uniques will be doing
motherfucker
this.
that I know, right?
There's kind of a bunch of places.
Who uses an
And I
ultimate
believe
in her
last but
build.
not least, so if you remember last time we were on stream and I talked, I brought up
Death
how we
Trap
had a
is
stated
fun.
goal of trying to scale effects that don't really scale very well. These are generally effects where there's a legendary power that spawns a thing, like let's say earthquakes with the barbarian or dust devils on the barbarian, things like that. and those effects didn't really scale very well, and we wanted to add things that do. So in the Season of Blood, we've added some things. This isn't going to be everything we do forever. This is just the beginning, but we've got 2 new Paragon glyphs per class.
I feel like they should rearrange the glyphs, like location of the glyph, because it's really hard to get to a certain glyph. One is at, okay, let's say we want to unlock a Paragon socket. I mean a socket for a rare glyph, right? But the legendary node is on the other end, far end of the board. So very closer.
Where we are going to be adding these scaling
very
effects, so now you can create
closer.
builds, hopefully, that you weren't really able to before, and we gave you a way to scale them. And again, we're planning to do more
Yeah,
of
there are
this kind
certain
of
bots
design in
like
the
this,
future. I
guys.
think it's very interesting, and yeah, so here's going to be some examples. So the first one is
Paragon
Rumble.
bot.
This is a new Barbarian glyph, and it's basically going to let your Earthquakes scale multiplicatively.
I mean, you might be thinking, Neuro, why don't you make a Paragon build that you can connect the bot sideways, right? Okay, maybe.
With all the strength that you get in an area around the glyph when you slot it, and then you also deal more damage based on
Keep
each
that in mind.
active earthquake that you have. So you want to get a lot
Luckily,
of active earthquakes.
respecting a Paragon bot
Just to clarify, I think
is not
when you
that
building
expensive
strength around
anymore.
this will give additive damage to your earthquakes. Most glyphs on the top section is all additive damage.
Oh yeah, good clarification.
10
And
M will do.
the additional bonus
Yeah.
About
gives you
10
a multiplicative bonus
10,
based
15
on how
M.
many earthquakes you're creating. So it's still great for earthquake builds because it increases all of your damage that way.
Probably just 10 M.
Next is the Stalagmite. This is for the Sorcerer. So we're giving you a way to scale your ice spikes per intelligence purchase within range, and then also your ice spikes are going to have a higher crit chance.
Wow.
And then we've got
All right. I know we've gone through a ton of slides here.
yeah.
A lot of slides, a lot of stuff to actually cover regarding class changes, of course, all the damage bucket changes and everything. One thing to note is I know we only highlighted a few specific things on classes. As we've mentioned, patch notes are actually going to be coming after the stream. So you'll be able to read through every single class change, all the different changes that we've even talked about last week on the stream, and other items, including bug fixes and everything.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
It's a pretty
Season 2 is
lengthy
gonna be
patch notes.
explosive.
It's by far our largest one yet, for sure. In fact, I think if you add up all our patch notes beforehand, this one ends up being half of all our prior patch
But I'm not
notes
too sure for how
So
long though.
I believe
Depend on the player
There's a lot
base.
for us to do.
I for one is
so,
slow.
patch notes will end up going live here after the stream.
I'm
so
talking
you can
about
check it out on
item target look
Diablo4.com.
right.
We do want to talk about some
for the
of
Uniques
our
in,
future
respective,
changes that are also gonna be
bosses.
coming post season 2. For instance, patch 121. We haven't even hit patch 120. Patch 120 is coming out on October 17th with the start of season 2.
Oh.
But patch 121 is actually going to be coming out after season 2, but before BlizzCon. But we
After
did want to
season
actually
2?
cover what
What
would
do they
be
mean?
in patch 121, and we also wanted to talk about how future content pieces, like within season 2, we're going to be constantly updating.
so season
and
2
adding
is
new
gonna
features, to
a
the
long
game
one.
within
Okay.
season 2, and players will hear more about that at BlizzCon and future streams. But one
Hey,
big
there's
thing that we
dummy
are adding in
training, huh?
121 is a training dummy,
Ooh.
kind of a target dummy where you can actually practice builds, test out different items and everything like that. This will be located in Kyovushad in a cellar.
Whoa, hey, that
and you
means
can actually
dummy
customize
training
it and
is
change it
viable.
from a normal training dummy to adding additional ones or boss ones, and you'll actually be able to test out
to practice
different
boss
builds.
fight.
So this will be
I mean, to
coming
practice
in
for
121.
and get ready for boss
Just a reminder,
fights.
I'm going to continuously say that so people don't go
my.
like, why wasn't it in on October 17th? 121.
Yes.
But this will
Oh my.
be towards the end of this month. We'll have more information as that actually hits. And then
Goodness.
the other feature that we're going to be adding, and this one's a big one that I know people have been asking for. In 121, there will be an option for you to be able to reset your Paragon board, which we know that everyone has been asking for, and it's something that we've been wanting to put in.
Yeah.
And
Your respecs.
so, easier respecs is
So
going to be
scroll
way better
amnesia
for players.
is purchasable.
And so in 121, that feature will actually be coming. And again, like
I swear,
I said,
if they make it,
towards the end of
if
this-
they make Scroll of Amnesia a cash a premium, what do you call this? Platinum purchase, a cash up item, players will buy it, guaranteed.
month. We'll have that. We'll talk more about that. There will be patch notes associated with that update.
Yeah, they
And
should
of
add it
course,
to the
we'll
cash
have
shop. I mean,
more
thinking for the
updates
game.
to season 2
I mean, they have to
that
earn,
we'll be
right?
talking about at BlizzCon. So you should make sure to check out BlizzCon if you're going, or if you want to go, you can still grab a ticket. And of course, we also yesterday announced the BlizzCon collection, which has a bunch of Diablo 4 stuff along with some World of Warcraft, Hearthstone, Overwatch items in there. But with the Diablo 4 items, it does include a like the Legendary collection actually includes a token
Actually, the
for the Premium Battle
horse, the
Pass.
mounts, and
The,
pretty
Premium
not
Battle
bad.
Pass. We've been getting a lot of questions about this. The Premium Battle Pass token in that can be used for Season 2 if you want, or it can be used for any future season. So you can use that token.
That's why it's
you
called
can save
Premium.
it if you like, and that is included in this. And it also has some really cool mounts with some cool effects and mount armor and everything. So
Is it
but that
only
is
available for
on
BlizzCon's
the
goers?
Battle.net shop now for, and that is the BlizzCon collection.
Cool.
We have some Q&A that we do want to go over today. I know that players, if you have questions, feel free to jump into Twitch chat and ask your questions. I will butcher your names. Guaranteed. It's a promise I do every stream. That's why they bring me here. But we'll be answering questions on Twitch chat. But the first question I know that we've heard a lot about is what are your plans for like underperforming skills? 'Cause
That's a
it's been
fantastic
something
question.
That, we've
This
heard
is
a
a
little bit
fantastic
about
question.
it today, but I think it's something that we've been hearing for the last couple months of like, hey, some of these builds just don't feel viable. It feels like I'm going under one build. Like, what are you guys planning on doing that?
Totally. Well, first we plan to redo all the underlying math of the game and change how all the builds work and change all the So skills specifically. Yeah, there are definitely skills that are underperforming that don't have as wide of a use case as we would
The
want.
game director on the left.
I would say we're going to try and look at them at an individual basis.
Is
on
it
a skill
Johnny
by
Depp's
skill. There are
cousin?
definitely ones that we've identified as a team that we're already going to start taking a look at. We learn a lot when we launch the game to millions of people, right? Well, of course, we have ideas that sometimes pan out,
swear to
sometimes
God,
they
man.
don't. And when they don't, we have to kind of reevaluate. Well, what was the purpose of it? Can we still keep the heart and the spirit of the skill?
He can
Without
pass
changing
off
it
at Johnny
completely, or
Depp.
sometimes we do need to change it and make it like fit an actual use case that's unique that doesn't fit any other skill. So it kind of depends what our answer is on a skill by skill basis.
His name is Adam.
But it is definitely a goal of ours that we don't want a skill
Adam
to
too.
just languish forever and just not really have a use case or be useful. To clarify though, I do think it's okay that a skill is a little more niche and maybe isn't like, we're not saying every skill needs to be used equally by every player.
No.
I don't think that's a reasonable expectation. I don't know if it's very healthy, right? I think there's something attractive about feeling smart that you're able to find this niche use case or you're playing in a unique way that not many other people do. But if a skill isn't fulfilling even any purpose or the purpose it was intended for, then I think that's grounds to reevaluate and try and find something that works better for it.
Okay, in that case, why bother have different core skills for player to choose?
Definitely, and there's a few different ways that a skill can kind of fall.
I understand the way that you answer this question is fairly civil, reasonable. Players like to find a niche, but how players are able to find their niche is when all core skills are viable. Isn't that the case?
Short, right? It's not just always a
That
matter
should
of
be the case
numbers,
first, right?
It's not
Foundation
just,
or
just crank up the
balance.
damage on it. If the damage is crazy,
Respective
of course
players
it'll
have
be
to-
usable.
No,
But
I
that's
mean-
not the right answer all the time. Sometimes, we
Also
looked at, we
dependent
talked
on
about
the
puncture
gears
earlier
we're
today
gonna
on the
pick up,
rogue.
which is gonna
And
be a huge
if you look
thing.
at just pure damage, puncture compared to the other basics on rogue, about comparable.
Oh,
like
wait.
it wasn't an outlier in one way or another. But we saw so many players playing
Unless they
puncture
have
because of its
specific
interaction
core
with
skill
other systems.
affixes.
Right? We had it. Hey, puncture is a really
Like Druid.
easy way of applying vulnerable,
Right.
and
Sorceress.
in Season of Malignant, vulnerable was really valuable. So we're not only tackling this on making the other options more usable and
necromancers.
interact in an easier to use way, but also adjusting the systemic issue like, hey, vulnerable's too mandatory, so you have to take the thing that applies vulnerable. And now that that's less of a hard requirement, we're hoping that that brings these other basics to the fore. And we're going to take a similar approach when we look at other underperforming skills as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good point, is that, we talked a lot about base systems.
I think this vulnerable status effect is really giving the game directors, the game developers, a huge freaking headache. Like I mentioned before, the best thing to do is just remove it altogether. Yeah.
of the game in the Season of Blood.
Problem
and the reason
solved.
why we're really looking at all these base
They don't have
systems
to
and
come up with
changing
all
them
the
pretty
charts and
significantly is
whatnot.
that we want a stronger foundation so that we can identify these outlying skills or effects.
Why
And
are
now-
they having such a problem trying to like stack or build up different variations of quick strike, vulnerability damage, overpower, for example? Because vulnerable damage on its own is considered as a base damage. It's neither a damage over time, which is in the game, and it's neither a crowd control damage. So unless they were to announce saying, okay, check this out, everybody, we're gonna add in status effect damage, then it's viable. But other than that, I think they are just giving themselves more headache, having vulnerable damage maintained in the game. Yeah,
we can
my humble
fix them in a
opinion.
way that's more healthy for the overall game. Because when the overall systems are healthy, then we can go back and look at the outliers and fix them in a good way. You know, like we could have fixed Puncture by just taking away the vulnerable application, right? But really the problem's vulnerable, not Puncture necessarily. Yeah. So.
Take away the whole
All
fix
right, we have a
altogether.
question here from Zigzag. Are channeling skills still not allowed to overpower after this patch, considering the scaling changes?
This is true, yes. It's just part of the way Diablo 4 works is that channeling skills do not overpower. That's partially because it would just, if you, overpower is determined on a skill cast basis. So when you cast a skill, the game...
There's already, when you cast a channeling skill, there's already OP, and you have overpower, expect like, I don't know, hundreds, billions
did you overpower or did you
hundreds,
not?
millions of
And
damage.
if you overpower with a channel skill, then channel skills can
Too
in theory
much
go on
stacks.
forever. And that would just be a situation we don't want to live in where you're just fishing for procs basically of overpower, and then as soon as you get it, you let it go forever. That's not really the kind of gameplay we want to encourage in Diablo 4. And
Wait! Why not? That's what makes the game fun, right? And it's not easy to get procs, yeah? We need to watch we need to watch the gameplay, we need to watch when is the boss gonna attack us, we need to evade, we need to cast our skills, and it's not easy to stack on procs, yo.
And so it's
Why
true
not?
that, yes, channeled skills do not overpower. But we're still looking, when we're looking to balance channeled skills, such as Incinerate, we know that going in.
This game is based on procs.
They should be balanced and tuned around the fact that they can't overpower. And actually, to allude to that, because that's a good segue.
If they were just to explain, okay, for certain skills, zero chance of overpower, that would make sense, because this particular skill itself is already very OP.
Remember back,
Like
I
channeling
talked about the
skills.
Barbarian and the Druid, how we're capping that unlimited cap of power that you can get. That's kind of also why overpower doesn't work on channeled skills, is that if we made it work, we would have to tune and balance all of overpower around the potential infinite duration that a channeled skill has. And that means that now overpower only gets used for channeled skills, because that's the only place that it's going to be good, and then everything else doesn't feel as good because of it. That's why we're adding these caps and things to some places, is that it's not really because we don't like people to get a lot of power, it's that everything else must become weak for one thing to be even reasonable.
Are they trying to say that core skills in general now no longer can overpower? Will no longer be able to overpower in Season 2?
Let alone strong, if we allow infinite scaling of things. And that makes, while that one thing might be really cool, it makes the overall game much less fun.
I am not sure about this, guys. Okay, FYI, before we watch this dance stream today, reacting to it as very first time watching this, I haven't even watched, I actually withhold myself from watching any other famous channels who will have talked about the upcoming changes. I bet my ass, okay, I bet my ass cheek, right, that these big channels, their utmost complaint is about this. That channeling skills, aka core skills, whatever skills you call it that can be channeled, like your whirlwind, your, can no longer overpower. That doesn't make any sense. I suspect it would be the biggest complaint in big channels.
Spitfire a few questions. I'm just going to answer really quickly, just so I can
Very
a lot of
strange.
questions here.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, if that's what they are trying to say, if that is really the case, why bother having such headache during the first part, like the first, with the chart and all that, the quick strike and the overpower. Why so troubled? Why so troublesome with that?
Are there plans on like yearly roadmaps and roadmaps for the game? BlizzCon.
Unless they are saying, okay, because we want to encourage players to keep using their ultimate skills. So ultimate skills will often overpower. That would be a much better explanation, and I suspect it could be the case.
Stay tuned. In
makes sense,
regards to,
right?
we're getting a lot of questions about social features and like group finders and clan features and everything. Those are things that we're looking at and most definitely have been taking in a lot of feedback. Nothing to announce today, but it is something that I know the team
Adam
is
Fletcher's
very
eyes
much,
are like this.
Reading and seeing. Does this mean that Tempest Roar only drops from Duriel, or can it drop from
That's
other
cute.
rare mobs?
Lovely.
No, it
Adorable.
can drop from other rare mobs. Duriel just happens to have we were showcasing the specific drop tables for uniques for these bosses
Save
here.
it as
so
your-
you'll know, like, hey, if I want to get
Please,
a Tempest Roar
fellow
on a
Diablo
Duriel or
heroes,
something, I can actually
please save
farm
all
Duriel
this
and have a
as
better chance
your
of knowing that.
desktop
I wanted to clarify, you can still
Screensaver.
get them in the other parts of the game. When you finish Nightmare Dungeon,
I
and go
will-
through
I
it,
may
they can
do
still
it.
drop off of mobs, be it end of
I may
Nightmare
do
Dungeon
it.
rewards. You still get them have Hell Tide, all those things.
so
Just
easily
go-
accessible.
Doing this, you have a higher chance to get these specific things.
You can just look at your screen. Okay.
Let's see. We
Certain
have
boss drops
a
this
question
unique.
from Sock and Boppers. Will we be seeing more support or basic focus builds this time around? I don't
Like
know what that
basic
means.
skills?
I guess so.
Yeah, basic builds.
Yeah,
Basic skill builds. Yeah.
There are
there's
basic skill
not
builds.
Much support for like
Okay.
building your entire build around dealing damage with basic skills. That's not something that we have a ton of support in the game for right now or in Season of Blood, but it's definitely something on our radar. Is like, hey, this is a cool idea of making your basic skill, kind of flipping it on its head, right? Basic skills right now are a bit more of a setup.
That would be it would be very strange to have skills built on basic skills. Skill builds or our loadouts built on basic skills, because it's like reverse. If you know what I mean. Shouldn't be core skill and ultimate, and the basic skill should be something that is a general damage, like a basic damage. The generates
a bit more
fury
generator
or
type of
energy
skill.
or mana.
That's definitely a design space that we are looking into and will be making designs for in the
What are
future.
your thoughts about this? Comment
Don't
under
have
the
any
comment
specifics to
section
share yet,
below right now.
obviously, but it's certainly on our radar to enable those going forward.
Yeah, we know it and we think it's cool too.
Yep.
Okay.
Some more designer specific questions from Lucky Luciano. I know that.
FYI, certain class basic skills are very powerful.
How are the necromancer and
If you know some of the basic skill that is powerful,
being balanced to
comment
account for
under
the
the section
for the
below. Comment
changes to
under the
resistances
comment section
which
below right now.
intelligence characters
We'll be
can
uploading this
inherently benefit from.
part of the vault
Sure.
to
I can
YouTube.
take this one. So, one thing to keep in mind is when you're making a fantasy ARPG or a fantasy-based games, we do actively want there to be some differences between the classes, where some are better or worse at some things than others, right? We want them to have boons for picking your class, so
True.
that they're, you feel different
Make
than
the
all the other
class
ones. Right?
special.
If everyone's just like a blank
Each class special.
that would be a very different game than what we made for Diablo. So that was partially why when we talked about resistances, we talked a lot about how our goals are that everyone can kind of comfortably get there. Because what we didn't want was, if resistances really matter and you can't get to cap, or you can only get to cap at like level 100 with maxed out gear, and even then you may not be able to, and you have to like do this really complicated puzzle, then those
puzzle
classes
would
would have a
be
really
something
large advantage
that
over the other ones.
will only be
in the elemental
revealed when
resistance
Season
realm,
2
right?
launch.
And a lot of our bosses and things do that type of
Not
damage,
yet
so it
been
would actually
revealed,
be a
though.
really big balancing issue. Because
Puzzle.
of that, we made it that it's a very achievable goal. This goal might be a little bit easier to get on sorcerers, necromancers, or whoever they have the int scaling with elemental resistances or whatever stat may have you. And we also even purposely make effects.
When
like,
they say puzzle, do they mean variation of gears put together? Puzzle?
passive nodes or paragon nodes or other designs that are class specific, different classes can get to different breakpoints easier than other ones, and that's by design. Kind of if you remember when I talked about like the perfect balance world and we have like a gap, this is the world we actually live in. We want like barbarians to be better at some things than necros, or druids
Thank
to be
you.
better at some things than rogues, and vice versa, right?
Of course.
that makes for a more interesting and compelling experience where your class experience
uniques.
when you're playing through the game feels different, right? Like if you play a
course.
sorcerer for the first
Bring back the tankiness of barbarian. Oh, fuck's sakes.
time, and when you played a barbarian,
Can
you're
stand
like,
there
oh
and
wow,
attack,
it's really nice.
no
and
need
it's
to
easier for
evade.
me to fix this resistance game than when I'm playing on my barb. Or hey, when I'm playing on a barb compared to a sword,
Yeah.
it's really nice. I have all these unstoppable skills that move me around everywhere. You know, like we want there to be kind of differences in pros and cons to things.
Yes,
So,
please. Shouldn't that
really
be the
when
case
When we
already?
need to make a change is when it gets out of that
I'm sorry.
realm that's kind of reasonable, right? If
I got
something's too far down,
a little bit
even where,
emotional.
you know, it's too painful to play a class for some reason, right? Like we've heard some feedback from Necromancer players where we don't give them a ton of mobility and they're, you know, kind of sad, hey, we don't have enough and we need to get brought up here. Well, we're okay with being a little lower. We just, what we're at is not acceptable. And then same thing on the high end, right? Where maybe it's too easy to get things, then we need to bring it in. So,
Yeah, of course. That's
the answer is we made resistance
sorry,
this way,
I sound
knowing
like a
this in
broken
mind,
record, but
so that,
shouldn't
you know,
that be the
barbarians,
case
it's still going to be
already?
very easy for you to get to this cap just by playing the game and doing a little bit of planning. So we don't expect there to be a huge power discrepancy, especially since everyone's going to get to that cap eventually anyways.
Awesome. We have a question from Psychophant.
Cap for resistance to elemental damage is expected for season 2. No matter what class we chose, right? But I don't think that's what I do not think that's what the viewer were asking though.
Which is a good question. It's for Barbarian specifically.
Sure.
What are your plans to address Barbarian resource generation and uncoupling it from shouts?
And tankiness, come on, and
Yeah,
tankiness.
in the Seasons of Blood, or in the
Am I the
Seasons
only
of
one that's
Blood,
complaining
we
about the
haven't
tankiness of
completely,
Barbarian?
Answer the shout issue.
Comment under the
We're
comment
aware of
section
them, like,
below.
you know, players want to put on all the shouts and then shout all the time.
I haven't played Barbarian in a
just
while,
yell at
so please
enemies
forgive
a
me.
lot, I guess.
They shout at me a lot.
We're still looking at what we want our solutions to be. And we're also looking at a similar thing with sorcerers with equipping defensive skills, where they want to take like, you know, Frost Nova and Flame Shield and Teleport and do all of them. It's a deeper issue to solve that I think requires us to really look at why people are picking them and just make sure that they're still okay picking some, just not picking all of them all the time. We don't have anything to announce yet,
Pick
but
what
it is something that
and
we
what
are aware of.
all the time.
But it's a little bit more complicated, I think. One of the things, I'll just be transparent about how, at least for shouts, we're thinking is one of the issues that made it hard was that we designed a lot of our
Barbarian
passives
shouts.
and our legendary effects and other things that said, when you shout, gain X. And so right away, that becomes triple more powerful when you put on 3 shouts instead of 1. And we didn't balance it that way where, you know, we expected everyone to just always take the 3 things. Same with defensive skills or anything else that's synergistic like that. On the one hand, we like these kinds of designs like, hey, your core skills do more damage or your other things, you know, of a category do more to make you think about mixing the category. But when we go too far, and we definitely, I think, did with shouts as an example, then it just says, hey, do all of them or don't do any of them. And the answer
There is a very good reason why each skills have cooldowns so that we can't abuse it. And if the game dev is trying to say, what they're trying to say here is skills do not stack on each other, even all can be activated after cooling down. That's just weird, man.
answer right now is really do all of them because they're all really strong independently. So we may need to like decouple them, which is like, hey, instead of all your shouts get increased duration or you always heal when your shouts are active, it'll be when specific shouts are. But then, you know, that doesn't feel good. It's kind of limiting because we're kind of telling you what to do. So we have to try and walk that balance really well, which is a difficult tightrope to walk.
Guys, am I the only one freaking out here? There are cooldowns on. I don't want to sound like a broken record. Am I hearing this wrong? That shouts and skills do not stack anymore?
A question here regarding.
So what's the cooldown for then?
From Max78. Sorry, I don't want to butcher the name. Any plans on making more glyphs or bonuses spell agnostic?
So strange.
Yes, so as we're making more content
Comment
going
under
forward
the
in
comment section
future
below
seasons,
right now
we're
if
going
you
to be
know
making a lot more glyphs.
for sure what
And,
they
you know,
were
that
talking
is definitely
about.
design space, is to work on categories of skills or either
freaking
other
out a
unique
little bit.
effects. It's not always
Just a
going to
little
be. And honestly, we showcased 3 glyphs here on the stream, and we're adding in 10 new glyphs in Season of Blood.
Please put the glyphs closer to the sockets. Rare glyph nodes, rare glyph sockets.
And they're not all that exact same design.
On Paragon bots.
So yes, the design space for making new glyphs is definitely very open, and it's something we're going to be exploring going forward.
Awesome.
This is actually a good question because we talked about CC last week, which is this is from Masticaz. So what's the reduction for CC? I know you said against the player, but with an overall reduction, does that reduce the sorcerer's ability to CC enemies specifically, and then the amount applied to enemies? And
no, we didn't do any changes or significant changes to outgoing CC. This is only incoming CC to the player, not CC of you to the monster.
That's actually a really good question because I know
what's
when
the
you
question
hear
again?
like, reduction of CC, it's like, oh, now I'm going to CC enemies way less.
That's a good
It's like,
point.
no.
Reduction
We did
to
this on
crop
the
control
player
duration?
itself because we have heard a lot of feedback from players about, you just sometimes you just get, especially in higher level dungeons, you just get completely stuck. And all the CC changes are actually noted in the patch notes. So you'll be able to read more about that. Question from Darth Microtransaction, DM. Know who DM is? He's a
FYI, Burden of Solace, there are a couple of really strange changes.
a Diablo partner that we have. How many total new legendaries and new unique items are coming in season 2?
Mechanics-wise.
Uber uniques. Yes, there are all 3 of those that are being added.
Well,
New
legendaries, new uniques, not new Uber.
Not Uber
Not an
uniques.
Uber.
Yes, sorry.
New.
That is all in the patch notes. So you'll read them in the patch notes.
Yeah, you'll get to see them very soon. I don't have the exact number off my head.
I think
know
it's
a pretty
18
good amount.
total.
I may do a separate video to summarize this particular review of a separate video on YouTube.
18.
Yeah, there's 5 class legendaries.
I have a
5
lot
class
to say.
uniques, and then
At least for like maybe
generic legendaries
7 minutes.
6.
Instead of us just randomly
Yeah, I don't want to give you a wrong number.
Okay,
You'll see it really soon. There's a good number.
Check the patch notes.
All right, we're going to take one more question here. This is from Cropier.
They're trying to be...
with the changes to damage buckets, it'll be much harder to just stack very high damage to overcome some of the hardest content like Uber Lilith. Do you plan to make adjustments to bosses to account for lower damage ceilings?
First and foremost, in case I forget, alright? Mechanics-wise, the game dev on the extreme left mentioned they do not want players to stack on procs anymore. They will achieve millions of number damage, big numbers, okay? That is very scary if they were going to really head towards that direction. Because I'm not too sure. I don't know. The fun about the game is achieving these huge numbers, and FYI, I'm not too sure if any of these game dev realize, okay, it's not difficult to achieve these high damage numbers anyways. If you do not know how to proc these high damage numbers, you need to time your skills properly. You need to look at the timers on your skill bar. So it's not easy to proc anyway. So I'm very concerned. Number 2, skills do not stack on each other anymore, despite it still has its own cooldown on each respective skills. What the hell?
Oh, how far do I want to go into this answer? We've had a lot of conversations about this. Yeah, I'll do. All right. So, yes.
Please tell me I'm wrong. I would love to be told I'm wrong.
Power,
Okay, please comment under the YouTube comment section below right now. Tell me I'm wrong.
We did actually tune her a little bit, especially in the Season of Blood and going forward. So our idea with tuning Uber Lilith and this aspirational, very difficult content, right? Kind of a little history lesson, right? When the game came out, Uber Lilith obviously.
I'm not high. I'm sober,
right?
guys.
Her power level's up here, right? Everything else, like comparably, is somewhere around here. She's ridiculously crazy hard. Really, the only builds that were able to beat her were builds that had either like really strong interactions, like Bone Spear Necro, where it was just like really overtuned,
and aspects that are specific to single targets,
or ones that were bugged, right? Where they just got like 100x more power.
Aspects
than other things. Wasn't really intended. We don't really want our aspirational content to live in that space where like only oversights can really beat it comfortably. Our goal for it was always that most builds would be able to beat it, and it was kind of an achievable goal, but it was hard. And obviously, having that balance in a multiplicative scaling game is really hard, it turns out.
Yeah.
In Season of Blood, one thing that is really nice and is an advantage to all of these overhauls that we're doing to our math and the power level of the classes is that before, like we talked about, the difference of multiplicative power of the crit Volan and everyone else was crit Volan was way up here and could compete with her. Everything else couldn't really. So you kind of were forced into these builds to have a fair chance at the fight, which isn't really the world that we want to live in. Now that we've kind of, stabilized the ground of all the builds, they can't, in theory, I'm hoping, can't get as crazy of a difference in power level between each other. That means that now we can more finely tune things like Uber Lilith, like any other endgame content that we make, that they can be more stable as far as who can beat them. So we took a look at Uber Lilith.
Are they talking about balancing in basic, core, passive, any other skills in the skill tree?
And you'll see that we've
Why is
tested
it so
her
conflicting?
internally with builds that aren't those ones that we know are crazy, and tuned her to a degree
wait.
where we believe these average builds
Sorry,
will be
it
able
wasn't
to defeat
conflicting.
her.
It is one of
Obviously,
the
there will be variants.
thing
Like I
that
said, the top ones and the bottom ones will be
they
some,
mentioned
but it'll
already.
be much
yeah.
more.
They are going to try to make basic skills a viable kind of a skill build.
In line with one another. So we did take a look at that specifically, and we do believe that just the foundation of the game as a whole will mean that more players and more builds will be able to do more content.
Yeah, it goes back to what I was saying in the damage bucket discussion, was that our intention is not to just bring everyone down. It's to open up the room for more builds to reach that same level of power. Let more builds take on Uber Lilith.
Told you guys, right? Nothing is free. Hence all the class buffs earlier.
And not just have to rely on either crit vulnerable
my gosh.
interaction or rely on bugged interactions. You don't have to.
Yeah. At the end of the day, what this will likely mean
goodness.
also is
Okay.
that if you were a crazy strong build, or if you
Wow,
find
this is a
something that's
huge
crazy
price to pay. Just saying. Yeah. Others.
strong, she'll probably be easier compared to live.
I would
but then
love
your average
to
person,
react to
she'll
other big
be much more
YouTubers'
doable.
reaction.
You still have to play really well, though.
Their
It's a hard
reaction is
fight.
gonna be the
It's
same
still
as
hard.
ours.
It's still a hard fight.
Yeah, and I think there's also even just changes that you guys had already talked about regarding like resistances and things like that. That will also be
Yeah, like the
beneficial for
foundation of
that.
everything
the
is
fight
different,
is gonna
but
be- yeah, most
I think
definitely.
overall it'll be more achievable.
Awesome. Well,
Almost-
thank you,
done.
Adam. Thank you, Charles, for joining us, and everyone for listening to
my.
a bunch of designers
A whole lot of math.
go
and
into
design
numbers
process.
and math and everything for you guys regarding class changes and all the other damage buckets and resistance changes that are coming to the game. Just a reminder, Season 2, Season of Blood, starts on October 17th. That is the same day Season 1, Season of the Malignant, ends. So you guys will find that the transition between seasons will just be fluid from one season to the next. But that will begin on October 17th. Also, of course, like what we announced
Okay, before
week,
okay.
Diablo 4 is coming to Steam. So you can wishlist that
One
now.
final
So if
thought.
you prefer to play on Steam, you have
Before
that
you go for our
option
second
of being
break.
able to grab Diablo 4
Before
on
we
Steam.
start our
So you
Diablo
can
4
go there
gameplay.
and wishlist Diablo 4 there right now, and it will be available on October 17th. That does support cross progression and cross-platform play. So if you do want to play with other people on BattleNet or on consoles, you still can. And if you want to carry over your progress from BattleNet or consoles over to Steam, you still can as well from there. But October 17th, Season 2, Season of Blood, and at the same time, 121, just a reminder, the target dummy that we talked about and the Reset Paragon board feature will be coming in 121. That will
They
be
should
landing
just
in
again make scroll or amnesia cash up item.
late October and before
Why not?
BlizzCon. So make sure to tune in for those notes. Do I have anything else I need to say? Oh, BlizzCon. Make sure check us out at BlizzCon.
BlizzCon!
Yeah, BlizzCon's gonna be really cool. So thank you guys again. Thank you, Charles. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys in
Thank
game.
you again,
Thank you so much. See you in
Daz.
game.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness, everybody. Okay, so here comes our thought after thought. Okay, so as mentioned, if you guys have already rewatched our first reaction stream to the previous part 1 Campfire death stream, remember we were so excited about the great changes coming, right? And the vampiric buff because it's Season of Blood. Remember, I told you guys during that reaction stream, the previous reaction stream, nothing is free. This is what I mean. this specific part 2 death stream, Campfire death stream, proves my point. Wow, and I'm not gonna lie, the price to me, my gut feel tells me the price is a tad too much to pay. But if there's any consolation, the game dev has informed us themselves. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong under the comment section below. This implementation will only be implemented like in 1.2.1. So you'll be after the launch of season 2. Okay, so it will take a while after season 2, season of Plus is officially launched. 1.2.1, all these major mechanic changes will only be implemented in 1.2.1. Okay, so I hope, let's see how it goes. I still have faith. It's not a bad idea that all these changes will only be implemented in 1.2.1 because the game dev can judge. Game dev and players and everybody can judge for themselves. The 1.2.1 changes, would it be viable to be implemented to launch? Yeah. So let me know what you think under the comment section below overall, and I'll see you guys during on the next Diablo 4 video. See you guys!